We are back, guys. So today, like I said, we're dunking on the apocalypse. So this daily dunk was actually written by the guest, Andrew Howard, who we just talked to for an hour. Great conversation. Roll it back if you just got here and go listen to that absolutely before or after we dive into this article. So his piece was called, and you can find this on bitcoinmagazine.com. We're in for the long haul, guys, so strap in. This is called, Can Bitcoin Survive the Apocalypse? So it begins. We often use the term antifragile or censorship resistant to describe Bitcoin. But do these terms still apply if the internet is intentionally cut off or if some horrible catastrophic event occurs? And according to Andrew, it's quite possible that the World Economic Forum is looking to cut off the internet power to everybody at some point in the future. But that's that's neither here or there. Let us know what you think about that in the comments. So the short answer is yes, Bitcoin can survive an apocalypse. Not only this, but Bitcoin is actually the most robust network on the planet, as well as the most likely to stay alive in some sort of apocalyptic situation. Do you need internet in order to use Bitcoin? No. Do you need power from the grid? No, you do not. The idea of off-grid Bitcoin usage is one that encompasses many different rabbit holes, which we'll be exploring today. For newbies, I'd like to demonstrate that there are already different options to send Bitcoin which don't depend on the internet or power grid. Bitcoin is apocalypse-resistant money. This is a result of many different resources, ideas, and accomplishments that hardworking and innovative Bitcoiners have made. So an interesting question about this was raised during the Magical Crypto Conference in 2019 when Elaine Wu asked Adam Back, CEO of Blockstream, so, if China were to nuke us tomorrow and we nuke them back and all the internet exchange points were totally annihilated, is it conceivable that people could use their decentralized technologies and rebuild the Bitcoin network? Adam Back's response was, I think the Bitcoin network would continue to operate through this event, surprisingly. I mean, the hash rate would go down, but I'm assuming that there's some mining in the Swiss Alps in a bunker or in New Zealand or somewhere remote like this. Side note, I didn't know if you guys have ever been to Switzerland or know this, but there are literally bunkers in like every building. There's every man in Switzerland has a rifle at home from his obligatory military service, and every building has like a bunker in it. Very interesting setup they have over there in Der Schweiz. So there are pockets that would continue to be cross-connected, potentially using satellite equipment to keep the network online. So internet outages, there are many examples of governments censoring the internet across internet access to their citizens. Jigsaw, which is a unit within Google that conducts research on the internet shutdowns, has made the following observation. They said, quote, well, data prior to 2016 is patchy, and the true number of internet shutdowns is likely unknowable. Nearly 850 intentional shutdowns have been documented and verified over the last decade via Access Now's shutdown tracker optimization project. So outside of these, 768 of those shutdowns across 63 countries have taken place in the last 5 years. I bet you all didn't know that. And this is another problem with your cryptocurrencies that are not Bitcoin. They are centralized. They run on AWS, Amazon Web Services platforms. They crash when AWS crashes. AWS has crashed like 3 times in the last week. Wake up, people. Just buy Bitcoin. So some other specific examples of internet shutdowns. You might remember in Egypt around 2011, or in 2011 rather, as a result of anti-government protests, the Egyptian government blacked out its citizens. I mean, they shut the internet off for 5 days. Like 93% of Egyptian networks were completely unreachable. And more recently in Sudan in the summer of 19, after a government attack on protesters, which led to the death of nearly 100 people, the Sudanese government employed a partial and then a full internet shutdown. The shutdown lasted for like 5 weeks. So again, if you didn't know that this happens, guys, this happens all around the world. It can happen here. You can lose access to the internet. You got to shore yourself up. Make your Bitcoin strategy internet resistant or internet shutdown resistant. In Myanmar, as a result of violence between the military and the Arakan army, the internet has been cut off for the majority of the country since 2019. Since June of 2019, there's been almost no internet in Myanmar. Myanmar is the world's longest internet outage to date. So even the World Economic Forum has been mentioning a cyber attack with COVID-like characteristics, and this is the cyber pandemic that everyone is talking about. You know, it's coming, guys. They need these crises to keep their currencies alive. So this cyber pandemic is a sort of blackout event where all devices will have to be like fully disconnected from the internet. The World Economic Forum also recently conducted Cyber Polygon, which is a training exercise that simulated a horrible event like this. The exercise involved executives from a large multinational corporations, non-governmental organizations, and officials from various governments, all planning for this to happen. The reality is that the internet can and has intentionally been shut off in the past. But does this mean that Bitcoin itself can be shut off? Absolutely not. Because Bitcoin is anti-fragile and it's apocalypse resistant. So let's paint a picture of what an apocalyptic scenario would look like in Bitcoin terms. If this were to happen, we would hypothetically lose internet, power, food chain, supply, water supply, gasoline, and public transportation. So what's amazing is that Bitcoin can still be used in those scenarios. Not only can you still send Bitcoin through a variety of different methods, but you can also run a node and theoretically even mine Bitcoin also, although that would be somewhat of a stretch, but it could technically be done. The point is, even if the internet and power go out, you can still use Bitcoin. It may not necessarily be easy, but it's nonetheless possible. So how does it compare to other forms of money during an apocalypse-like scenario? Gold, of course, has been perceived as a good thing to have if there were an apocalypse. I mean, that's like the hoarder's dream, is to have a bunch of bars of gold buried somewhere, right? It's historically been considered something you should hold when the world is ending, but that's not really the case. If you think about it, gold is actually a huge liability to hold when massive amounts of people near you are desperate. You can't hide gold, people. Gold is even more of a liability to transport and send under circumstances as well. Like, it's heavy, it's difficult to hide, difficult to move, difficult to defend. It's a physical object. Like, for these reasons, these impairments, countless of families have lost their gold, their whole life savings in gold, when escaping totalitarian regimes as refugees. You can read about stories like this from the Holocaust and all across the world. So aside from gold, you certainly, I mean, wouldn't be able to use your bank in apocalyptic scenario, or on a Saturday. If you need to transfer fiat currency, that's impossible in this scenario, other than the use of cash, but even that has physical limitations. I don't know how many of you are even, I don't even know the last time I touched cash. Like, the physical nature of cash makes it a liability in this sense. Just like gold. So not only are both gold and fiat subpar options in an apocalyptic scenario, but they're all the other sectors of investment, such as real estate, stocks, bonds, fine art, or wine, whatever you stored your value in before. These are useless to you in apocalypse. Like, to clarify, property itself can, of course, be a lifesaver in apocalypse. It'd be great if you had land, if you had your bunker, if you had your fences. Like, you can store all your resources and have all your food supply on your property. But that being said, there's a difference between your own property and a rental property, and even property that you own, as I've shared time and time again on this stream, is not yours and is subject to eminent domain and capture by the government. So in this case, having your own property for personal use would be an advantage if it were some kind of end time scenario, but having a rental property would be somewhat of a nightmare. So people might want to reevaluate where you're at, weigh the potential risks and pros and cons. So back to the point, the advantage of Bitcoin is that it is not physical, and that it does not require trust in a third party to use. It's data. You can transport it. You can put it on a QR code and a sticker and walk across the border. You know what I mean? Therefore, it's easier to hide, transfer, and prevent confiscation or theft. This is a major difference between Bitcoin and any other investment or stores of value mentioned. The importance of this cannot be overstated. Altcoins cannot be used during an apocalypse because they are not sufficiently decentralized. They are not even remotely close to Bitcoin in terms of decentralization. Sorry, Ethereum, you're gone. Amazon Web Services goes down, you're gone. Your Ethereum is broken. It won't work. You can't have access to it anymore. So let's get into some of these details now. Why is Bitcoin apocalypse resistant money? As previously stated, Bitcoin is the most robust network on Earth, and ironically, above Earth as well, thanks to Blockstream satellites. But how is it that Bitcoin is so robust? Well, it's decentralized. Sure, your nation state could temporarily shut off the internet, but they can't shut off Bitcoin itself because someone somewhere on Earth will still be mining and running a node. I have a node right here, right in front of me, guys. Internet goes down, no problem. I got a backup power supply. I just keep running this node, my own personal server. It's great. Keeping the network alive from home. There's a bunch of people in my area also running nodes. It's awesome. We're not reliant on our internet provider or the government for electricity or to run these things. So a prevalent example of how Bitcoin is decentralized is the large number of nodes that it has, which are distributed across many different parts of the earth, all enforcing the rules of the network, right? Every node enforces the rules and verifies every transaction. It's an important part of the procedure. So we all keep a copy of the blockchain and we all audit its supply in tandem. In order to kill Bitcoin, you would have to independently go to each node. You'd have to knock on every door, knock down every door in every country and every home, and destroy every single node that exists. And there's no way to find them. Although I'll point that out too. So given how many there are, this is just not possible. The most conservative estimates of how many nodes there are currently about 15,000, but it's impossible to say for certain. They don't all announce themselves. More can come online at any moment. There's certainly thousands more than what they are able to count on any given day. So Bitcoin is secure node-wise. Relating to the previous topic about the World Economic Forum's recent attention towards cyber attacks, Bitcoin itseleth is unhackable. SHA-256, which is its hashing algorithm, it's inconceivably secure. We're going to get into the specifics of SHA-256. I've got a special episode for you guys lined up later down the line because that's a whole nother rabbit hole on its own. But SHA-256 is also the same encryption that secures most of the things that you do online on your computer. It secures the fiat financial system as well, which is a much bigger honeypot by market cap standard. So if someone were to break SHA-256, they likely would not go for Bitcoin first, right? And we would change the protocol. We would update the security, roll back the chain if we had to, and simply continue on a stronger form of encryption. This is why quantum computing in this is it's no concern of ours. So despite what you might initially think, Bitcoin can be sent offline. Bitcoin is data, and data is by definition copyable. Data can be sent through many different forms of communication. It can be sent through mesh networks. It can be sent through SMS. It can be sent through ham radio, and it can be sent through Sneakernet, which is my personal favorite. It can also be sent through satellites. So we're going to look at each of these options shortly. So you can run a node without using the internet. The large distributed amounts of nodes that the Bitcoin network has make it apocalypse resistant money. But even more impressive, your entire area's internet could go out and you can still run a node using satellites. The Blockstream satellite network makes it possible by broadcasting the Bitcoin blockchain over Earth 24/7 for free. Blockstream engineer Grubels wrote a detailed article on how you can build your own satellite node and receive data coming from the Bitcoin blockchain. Note, so like the picture you guys should be seeing on screen right now is a TV dish, and you could use your own TV dish to run a node completely without the internet. Like, how cool is that? If you're a hobbyist, Bitcoin technology person, I'm sure you've already looked into it. Like, yeah, get on that, get that backup satellite, guys. Why not? So, for example, Dogecoin, SushiSwap, Ethereum, none of these altcoins have satellites flying above the earth in order to strengthen their networks, guys. These shitcoin casinos are completely centralized, and they will crash like all the rest of the fiat world in an end time scenario. But Bitcoin does. We have satellites flying above Earth. The characteristics like this are what separate Bitcoin from everything else. I mean, this is just one of the many things that I cannot hit this point home enough for you guys. Bitcoin is a separate asset class. It's orthogonal to the monetary system. It's a class of its own. It is serious money for serious people who are determined to keep the network alive. I mean, do y'all understand that? Let me know in the comments what you're feeling. I'm going to address, I'm sure there are a lot of comments popping up about this. I can see them. I'm going to get to you guys at the end of this. It's a lot of article to get through. So, how can Bitcoin be sent without the internet? How does this work? However, data can be sent, Bitcoin can be sent as well. The internet is simply probably the way you're most used to transferring data, but it's certainly not the only way. Even if an apocalypse doesn't happen, there are still valid use cases for offline Bitcoin transactions to take place. Surprisingly, roughly 40% of the world's population still remains offline. Think about that for a second, guys. 40% of the world's population is offline. So there's a real world necessity for transacting offline. When you start thinking about people who live in remote areas with little or no internet access, the fact that hyperinflation is common in these same regions where there is no access to internet underscores the importance of Bitcoin and the sovereign monetary wealth. I mean, it's one of the reasons, like, these people are offline, but they have track phones, they have cell phones, so they send their data through SMS services, which is not the same as the internet. We'll explore the following methods of offline transactions: mesh networks, Iridium, Rockblock, SMS, ham radio, and Sneakernet. So, offline transactions. 1. Mesh networks. What are mesh networks? As defined by Jigsaw, Google's Jigsaw unit, mesh networks work by bypassing telecommunications infrastructure, tapping straight into radio frequencies that pass data to nearby devices. From there, the data travels hop by hop until it can reach its destination or an open network. Specifically in Bitcoin, GoTenna, which is a device it suggests you go look up. It looks like a Sharpie. A GoTenna offers a mesh networking device that can broadcast transactions to a local GoTenna mesh network. The company partnered with Blockstream and offers its software for this as well. It's called TX10. The GoTenna device has a maximum range of 6.4 kilometers and can have several different relay points in order to lengthen the distance of offline transactions being made. Does that make sense, guys? So if I have a GoTenna, you're within 6.4 kilometers, you have a GoTenna, we can send data back and forth. We can expand that network to my producer, Chris, if he's within that 6.4 mile range. It's a local mesh network. It's grassroots. Grubels has also written an excellent article on this topic. He wrote, with this hardware setup, anyone can send and receive Bitcoin without an internet connection. It's resistant to network outages and can also maintain uptime through power outages, since all of the hardware is run off batteries. The hardware can, of course, be run off gasoline generators or solar panels if the power outage is longer lasting. So with this option, you could have a small community or even an entire city that has many different GoTenna devices which are geographically distributed in the area. That way, if there was ever an internet outage, using Bitcoin would still be possible. It'd be worth checking out if there is a local GoTenna community in your area, guys. You might already have a mesh network flying above your head and through your walls and you didn't even know it. It's worth noting that in order to broadcast a transaction to the greater network, GoTenna does still need an endpoint of the mesh network to eventually reach the internet. That's because the vast majority of Bitcoins run on the internet. But there is a case to be made for an entire sort of internet of GoTennas that could arise. So that being said, even a cell tower in a neighboring city can serve as an endpoint for this, as long as there are nearby relay points in between the offline area and the cell tower. So offline transactions too. We're going to talk about the Iridium Rockblock. Currently, the Blockstream satellite network solely offers a downlink connection, meaning that you can't send data back up to the satellite. You can only receive the data beaming down from the satellite. However, the Iridium network does allow for an uplink connection. This is also the largest satellite network, full stop, having global coverage and 66 satellites orbiting the Earth. So probably one of the most mobile and agile options for making a Bitcoin transaction is by using an Iridium Rockblock device. This is astounding if you think about it. Apocalypse or not, if people are in a horrible situation, having the power grid and internet service go down, and if they need to send money to a loved one during a disaster, they can do it with Bitcoin. They can do it with an Iridium Rockblock. They can send it through a satellite. Circling back to the debate of gold versus Bitcoin during an apocalypse, a transaction like this is obviously not possible to do with gold. Bitcoin is by far the most easily transportable form of money. It's just data and very small amount, very the network is small. The network is large, but the amount of data is kept small on purpose. This is why we have small block size, guys. Small amounts of data. Anyone can store a copy of the blockchain for as cheap as possible because Bitcoin is as compact and concise as it can possibly be. It's by far the most easily transportable form of money because it doesn't have physical limitations. As such, it's rendering gold obsolete as a form of money. The literal only limitation on Bitcoin, besides, outside of like the consensus rules that we've put on it, are the laws of physics itself. It's the speed of light is the only limitation. So when you get to greater distances, you guys can go read about this and somewhere else, but when you get to greater distances, like there is a minimum time penalty for sending messages that is incurred because of the speed of light limitation. But outside of that, I mean, we're pretty limitless here on Earth. The Bitcoin transaction being sent from a rock block satellite goes back to a ground station, and then the internet, and then to the larger network. So that's how that works. One of the last offline transactions we're going to talk about is SMS. So if the internet were to be blocked by your government or somehow made unavailable, another option in this case is sending Bitcoin through SMS. There are different methods of doing this, but one example of this is possible through a system which Pavel Rusnak created, where you can send Bitcoin through SMS and have it broadcasted to the greater Bitcoin network. This has already been achieved. You can look this up. Again, Bitcoin is simply data, and data can be sent through many different forms of communications. The very last, I think, form we'll talk about is amateur radio. So Nick Szabo of Bitcoin Lore initially presented on this topic at Stanford's Scaling Bitcoin conference in 2017. He brought forth a research project with Elaine Wu that explored how Bitcoin could be sent using weak signal radio propagation. The concept is quite mind-blowing. Sending Bitcoin through certain frequencies in the air, literally bouncing them off the sky, the ionosphere to be specific. Radio signals have to be quite strong to break through the ionosphere. That's why they usually use it itself as a sort of reflecting mechanism. And they come back to different locations. The signals come back and spread around the Earth that way. So unfortunately, ham radio licenses are legally required in order to send data through this means of communication. There's no license required to receive data through ham radio, but if you're messing around with it, I don't know what to tell you. Go get a license, don't get a license, who cares? That being said, this barrier might not be relevant, like in an emergency situation. No one's obviously going to be checking for your little ham radio license. Rodolfo Novak, founder of CoinKite, also demonstrated some proof of concept examples of Bitcoin transactions sent over radio. So as you can tell from his tweet, which I did not include, but he was able to send a lightning invoice from Toronto, Ontario to San Francisco, California via radio. Think about that, guys. Toronto, Ontario to San Francisco, California. That's got to be 1.5 thousand miles, 1.4. I don't know. That's quite a distance to send a Bitcoin transaction over radio. So with amateur radio, whoever's sending the Bitcoin could be in the middle of nowhere without internet. The key is the Bitcoin must be sent to a destination that does have the internet, so it can be broadcast to the greater network in order to be confirmed. Offline transactions, Sneakernet. So Sneakernet is commonly referred to defined as the transfer of data and electronic files between computers through removable media, such as hard drives, flash drives, and optical discs. I use Sneakernet all the time to secure my Bitcoin. They're devices that are physically transported between computers or on foot. A lot of you probably secure your Bitcoin without your kind of like hardware wallet ever touching the internet. If you use a cold card, there's an option to use a kind of Sneakernet like small chip hard drive that you just take from your device to your computer without connecting them. This is an example of Sneakernet, except if you just put that chip in your pocket and like went to a different country or something. Yeah, so the term Sneakernet, of course, refers to the sneakers worn by a person carrying information between computers. This opens up for many James Bond style possibilities for censorship resistance. This is probably how Edward Snowden was able to, get out of the NSA, the CIA office with all the government secrets, is just putting a little hard drive in his pocket. as previously stated, like a Bitcoin transaction is simply data. So any way that you can transport data, guys, you can transport your Bitcoin. The data can be sent in multiple different ways and can be creatively passed from user to user. And on top of that, I will mention also that Bitcoin transactions can technically be carried out on with pen and paper. You can carry your Bitcoin a great distance just by remembering your seed phrase or transporting your seed phrase in your head. I don't advise it, but if you had to do it, I mean, I'm sure you could memorize those 12 words if you had to flee. You could print a QR code of a raw transaction on a piece of paper and discreetly carry it with you over a long distance and broadcast the transaction to the Bitcoin network once you're in a safe place that has internet service. Those transactions don't even mean using a computer in this case. With Sneakernet, a Bitcoin transaction could mean handing a piece of paper to someone else or handing your shit, what are those called? The coin kite. What are those little coin kite devices? Somebody save me. Where's my producer? What are those called? Open dime. Yeah, open dimes. I've got one here somewhere. The open dimes. Go get an open dime if you want a good example of how Sneakernet works. You take this open dime and pass it to someone, use it as physical manifestation of Bitcoin. Yeah, they're great little devices. So the reality is right now, it's not really necessarily convenient for the average person to send an offline Bitcoin transaction through radio and satellites. So we've got to acknowledge that. However, it's possible, and you could do it if you want to, and you should try it out. But Bitcoin has not even been alive for 20 years, and people are already exploring options to transact with each other across borders, across the world, through radio, satellites, text messages, GoTenna, and even sneakers. These are remarkable accomplishments and endeavors in such a short amount of time. So imagine how apocalypse resistant Bitcoin is going to be in like 50 years. Think about it, guys. All right, let's give you guys some Bitcoin. That is Andrew Howard. That is the essay he wrote for Bitcoin Magazine. That got me pretty pumped up, made me want to bring him on the show. So there you have it. Thanks for listening.
Yo, what is going on, plebs? We're going to take a break from our programming to tell you about the resurrection of our print magazine, starting with the El Salvador issue. Starting this fall, Bitcoin Magazine will be available on newsstands nationwide and at retail stores such as Barnes & Noble. Don't want to get off your couch though? No problem. You can also go to store.bitcoinmagazine.com. So skip the line and get each issue shipped directly to your front door with our annual subscription. I'm talking 4 issues a year that contain exclusive interviews and profiles with leading Bitcoiners, actionable insights on the state of the market, breaking news and cultural trends, along with powerful photos and artwork from the best artists in the world.